So let's write an exclude level of detail expression. So remember, exclude says even if the visualization is at a finer level of detail, the following computation should be performed at a coarser level of detail. So it basically says exclude all of these other finer levels of detail and do the computation up here at the coarser level of detail. So let's just do an example. So let's set up the fine level of detail first. So we'll do region and country as rows. And so this table right now is at the country level of detail, but I'm going to perform a computation at the region level of detail. So what am I going to do there? I'm going to say GDP. Let's just do it. Create calculated field up top, and we'll call this GDP exclude, and we'll exclude country. Sorry about that. And then, so the format of level of detail expressions in Tableau is always the same. They're contained in curly braces, and they have the following format. So we say the method first, so exclude in this case, then what levels of detail you're operating with. Here we're going to operate with country region, a colon, and then the calculation itself. So here I'm going to do sum of GDP, like that. Okay, so what this says is I'm going to sum the GDP, but if country region is in the visualization or in the table, if that level of detail is present, ignore it, exclude it from the computation. And so in this particular case, this is going to be the sum across all countries within a region. So it's going to ignore that country region and just sum across the region. So if I drag this into text then, notice that this value is the same for every single country. So even though country is in here, this value, in fact, we can actually look at it. If we look at its data, even though this thing is in here, it is showing us that it's, and that's interesting. It should be, okay, because it's true. So even though this number was generated using the entire region, it's only showing us the ones with Algeria, because that's still true. But regardless, this value is the same everywhere because country region has been excluded from the overall computation. So it doesn't matter that this is Algeria, it's leaving it out. So for instance, we can confirm this is the same thing if we go to analytics, totals, and then drag this to subtotals. If we scroll down here, I went too far. The subtotal, and let me just go back here. Let me get rid of this. I'm going to put GDP, just normal GDP, in my text. Notice that this value, the subtotal for this region here, is 16 quadrillion. I don't even know what it's a big number. Trillion? 16 trillion. So it's 16 trillion just like it was when we used GDP exclude. So notice that our GDP exclude is the same thing as the subtotal. So this is really, really handy. So for instance, what this is saying is, if you want the percentage, imagine we do this, percent of regions GDP, you could say GDP, and we'll say the sum of the GDP divided by GDP exclude country. And I would have to say sum, I think. So essentially what this would do is give us it takes the sum of the GDP within each country and then it divides it by the total. And so in this way, and we might need to be a little bit more careful here, but in the same way that we can use GDP exclude country to get the subtotals within each pane, we could also compute our own percentage of totals without using the analytics, without using the quick table calculation. And the reason this is so important, even though it would match in these cases, like the subtotal that we arrived at with a level of detail expression and the subtotal we arrived at using the analytics, or we would have arrived at if we had done a quick table calculation or something, even though those matched in this case, they won't cover every single case. And so by making sure that the level of detail expression matches what we can do in Tableau natively in the cases where that's possible, allows us to develop confidence that when we need to do more complicated level of detail expressions, like we will in a future video, that we're on the right track. Like, this is how I always start things. If there's an example that I know works, and I can try to recreate that example with the new framework, and those two numbers match, I'm a lot more confident that I know what I'm doing than if I'm instead just going out and trying a brand new thing right off the bat. Confirmation is always key. So the fact that we can use this GDP exclude country and have this match exactly what we would get if we were looking at the subtotals from the analytics tab over here. The fact that those things match should give us a lot of confidence that we're on the right track towards doing more complicated things in the future.